Hello everyone, and welcome to the, DLC information video. There's been a lot of information, some leaks, some spoilers, and some things I've been able to puzzle out just even from stuff we just have in the game normally as to how absurdly massive this DLC is going to have to be for the Indigo Disc. The pretty much 5 major storylines that are going to have to be going on that they're going to need to resolve. The release date of when it's going to be, which we actually pretty much have at this point a concrete release date from something I've been able to find about it. Terraforms involving Terrapagos, or Terrapagos, however you really prefer to pronounce it. Possible return of the Battle Frontier, or just battle facilities in general, with of course the Indigo Disc taking place offshore from Unova, maybe even some information about the Unova remakes. And of course the most important thing, the ability to catch starters in the wild and not need a Masuda shiny head for them. So, before we get into all of that, please don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. We have a lot of stuff going on, including a shiny giveaway in a couple of weeks. But, let's get into everything, because this is a lot to unpack. We're going to start off with all of the stuff that we know. When we get into the stuff that is going to be leaks and potential spoilers, that is going to be a separate part of this. We're going to sort of divide this up into maybe 3 or 4 different sections. But if you want to skip the spoilers and the leaks and want to go in blind on everything that comes from there, but not the stuff that we know, but may be unaware of, that timestamp is going to be about 10 seconds before the spoilers and leaks start, and then it's going to end off a few seconds after that section ends. So, you can skip past it. So, we're going to take a little bit of a step back and really look at what we know that we don't know, and what we know that they haven't finished yet, because there is a lot of stuff within the story of Scarlet Violet and the Indigo Disc and Teal Mask that they've started but haven't finished yet. And there's actually 4 major stories that we know already they've started, one of which hasn't started, but that one is literally the Blueberry Academy Elite Four, which they've already told us about, so that's one of those 5 storylines. The other 4 are Terrapagos, Kieran's whole story, and Ms. Briar Area Zero. And the new Paradox Pokemon. Of course, we've seen Iron Crown and Raging Bolt, likely Paradox Entei, Paradox Terrakion, still unshown yet. As well as the one thing that we can pretty much expect to be seeing is there's going to be bringing back Dynamax Adventures-like methods of shiny hunting legendaries. The reason for this is that has been a feature of every single game since Gen 5. The ability to get all of the previous game's legendary Pokemon, or at least the vast majority of them. Generation 4 and Generation 5 had a lot of them be accessible, but not all of them. Generation 6 onward, they have made every single legendary accessible that was available at that time. We can also expect to see a new mythical quest to obtain a prior generation mythical. We saw Deoxys, of course, with the Delta episode, and then in Scarlet and Sword and Shield, we had the ability to get Keldeo. So the question is which mythical we're going to obtain. We're going to be getting into that a little bit later. But as for the stuff that we know, what we can expect, obviously the new Paradoxes. We've seen Raging Bolt, we've seen Iron Crown. Very likely, Paradox Entei is going to be Fire Dragon, and Paradox Terrakion is going to, unfortunately, be Psychic Rock. The first thing that we can pretty much expect to be seeing is with the BB League, the new Blueberry Academy Elite Four. Whether this is going to be a new battle facility, which I'm hoping it's going to be like the battle facilities, because it is an academy where people learn how to battle. As well as its design resembles the Battle Factory, if anyone remembers that thing. It does look a lot like the Battle Factory. As well as there are things called BB points. So obviously you're going to be doing things like maybe battling or mini-games, accumulating points to be able to do stuff. They have obviously had Battle Frontiers and Battle Facility things in the previous games, the Battle Tower back in Sword and Shield, and even though they did a bad job of the Battle Frontier being just the Battle Tower in Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, they're still aware of the Battle Facility's existence and the importance of it to the community. So, something even vaguely resembling that will likely be making its appearance here. As well as the Battle Facilities, we have an entire video in a few weeks coming up about them. When that's up, the cards will have that visible, but that's going to be coming out in maybe 3-4 weeks. Now for the trades and likely Terra raids. Ramzer. But as for the trades, we're going to go over that first. When you defeat certain major NPCs, I'm assuming for this it's going to be the previous gym leaders, the new BB League leaders, the Elite Four Classic and Gita, as well as your rivals Nimona, Arvin, and Penny, and very likely Clavel. Potentially including the Team Flare not Team Flare, Team Star, but as even the Team Star bosses, where after you defeat them, you'll be able to trade with them. The Pokemon you're going to be receiving from this, we don't know yet, but I think it's fairly easy to figure out what you're going to get from them, considering previously there have been trades with gym leaders. Though, the one major one was Jasmine back in Heart Gold Soul Silver, where you would actually get a Steelix. I think it's likely you're going to get a special pre-Terra changed base form Pokemon of whatever their ace was. So, say, for Kufu, I think that's what his name is. Yeah, the water type one, the guy who says Volt loses. Probably you'll get a Terra Water Crabrawler from him. From Caddy, you'd probably get a Terra Bug Teddiursa, and such. Terra Ghost Toxel from Rhyme. Likely that's what they would do, where you just get a base form thing, because in previous games they've done a gift Pokemon from major NPCs, it was the same line as their ace. And now the one that I am most excited for, sorry about that, it seems that for some reason my recording cut out. The one that I am most excited for is the return of legendary raids. Similar to Dynamax Adventures, they're probably going to be doing a special Terra Max raid thing for the legendaries. I don't think they're going to be doing anything like the Mewtwo Terra raid events for two main reasons. One is pure time. Even if they did one single week for every single legendary, there are simply too many legendaries. There are over 70 of them. If you include the Ultra Beasts, well more than 70. That would put you, considering these games are on 3-year release cycles, where you have one game come out, the next year the DLC comes out, then the year after that they release another game, very likely in this case going to be the Black and White remakes. And even if they do release legendary raids as one-week events, anyone can join those. You can't restrict something like that to the DLC. So people would just skate by not needing to do the DLC by, and yeah, I can catch my Kyurem, my Lugia, my Ho-Oh, my insert other legendary here without needing to buy the DLC, which again, further bad for business. That's why they're likely going to be including in a legendary raid feature, as well as I think this is how you're going to be able to get the 19th Terra-type crystals. There's something going to be in the speculation section that elaborates into why I believe this to be the case more heavily, but that goes into some speculation information things that skirt the line between leak and deduction based on clues in the game. But I want to stay on the side of caution with that one. As well as with the finishing of the Indigo Disc, we can expect between 200 to 300 Pokemon returning to the game. And with the legendaries returning, most likely, that is going to be a solid chunk of them. At this point, there's about 70-something legendaries. That is excluding mythicals and Ultra Beasts. That would add on 70 of that, so even if we lowball this to assume maybe 200 Pokemon return, subtract about 70, that's still 130 Pokemon returning, though the starters are all going to be returning, which further eats into that, which is why I think sort of the higher end, maybe 250, 300 total returning Pokemon, is what we can expect seeing. Other things that we do know is the trades and battles with previous major NPCs. Whether this is going to end up being like the Galarian Star Tournament, as they have mentioned that the major characters are going to be here, we don't know yet. I personally hope it's not going to be just the Galarian Star Tournament again. However, they have mentioned with the BB League, there are going to be puzzles associated with the new Elite Four. Whether this is just going to be the gym puzzles, essentially, but maybe on a larger scale, probably not going to be that. They're probably going to be much more centralized storylines because the Indigo Disc is Blueberry Academy. Well, at least the implication is. I don't believe it actually is the Indigo Disc. But that is going to be its own thing. They're not going to have these things be 5-10 minute thing and then you're done in the span of an hour. This is probably going to be a far more extensive thing. You battle them, and a significantly larger storyline plays out. We also know that specifically Carmine and Kieran are going to be at play because the end of the Teal Mask showed them going back to the Indigo Disc, or rather to Blueberry Academy, with the very ominous ending to Kieran's whole storyline, which that is going to be saved for the speculation part because there is a leak, as well as one thing from what I've been able to puzzle out through the storylines of what is being referenced by a few things in the Indigo Disc and Teal Mask, and the not so subtle framing of Kieran's want for things. So that's going to be saved for the speculation section because that could borderline into spoilers and leaks for some people, which I would rather take the precaution of saying sorry. Something else that we do know is this is where regional-based evolutions are going to be able to finally evolve in their regional forms. There are some Pokemon where they have to evolve in a specific location in order to go to their regional forms, things like Marowak and Cubone. In Alola, if you evolved on base Alola, it would turn into Alola Marowak. But if you went into Ultra Space and you evolved, it would turn into a Cantonian Marowak. For things like Hisuian Decidueye, well, the Hisuian starters entirely, and any Hisuian variants, Galarian variants, likely this is going to be where they evolve, because I've actually tested this out previously with a regular Hisuian Decidueye, bred that in Base Paldea with the Everstone, and it still evolves into regular Decidueye. If you hatch that egg, level it up, it turns into a regular Decidueye. That is a location-based evolution, which means the Indigo Disc is where this is going to be regional varianting, mutating them. We also know that this is where other regional variants like the Alola forms are going to be returning en masse. You can get Alola Ninetales presently, but you can't catch it in the wild. So this is where you're going to be able, in these special biomes, to get them. Which is going to be fairly good, because the regional variants are a pretty interesting thing. I don't think we're going to get any new regional variants, because this is a entirely artificial construct. There's not going to be any new species or new evolutionary families that have developed just in, well, a man-made island. We do, of course, know about the new 19th Terra type. I have stated my piece on this before, that it is, in all likelihood, going to just be typeless Terra. The reason for this is the other 18 Terra gem hexagon thingies are all around the crown, as well as the specific colors of it is a rainbow, and in the clip shown, should be on here somewhere, the Terastallized 19th Terra, Baxcalibur is facing a Dragonite, and it still stays base effective. So it does not turn Terra Blast into whatever typings you were before. It doesn't target super effectiveness. It stays a neutral typing. And the fact that they picked two pseudo-legendary dragons, I don't think was an accident. Especially when one of them is quad weak to ice, and the other is an ice type that does have an ice type move in its learn set. Likely what this is going to be is it's going to, you're not going to have any weaknesses, but you're not going to have any resistances. And it's just going to be your typeless. Potentially a damage boost will be applied, because otherwise why would there be a purpose to using this typeless Terra? A lot of Pokemon like their resistances for a good reason. That's kind of what makes them. But I believe this has more to do with Terrapagos, as Terrapagos' shell in its Terra form, because as we've known about Terrapagos, or as it was referred to in some internal files as Kodaikami, I believe that is how you pronounce it. Basically, this means ancient turtle. So, it is clearly an ancient thing that is basically the root implied of all terastallization, because its shell shows all the typings, as well as a little gem on its back is the same thing as the Terra button you press. But also, the 19th Terra icon looks like its shell. There's a big thing about that in the speculation section, as something else. I'm saying this because there's a lot of the speculation stuff, because there's a lot of the speculation stuff that I don't want to say right now, because it could potentially be spoiler for some people. But the 19th Terra type, I believe, is going to be just typeless, which, practically speaking, I don't think is going to be too impactful. But as for some other miscellaneous things, we know there's going to be mini-games. Of course, with Ogre Ousting, which was added in the Teal Mask, They're adding in mini-games, they're adding in other little side attractions that aren't just battling, shiny hunting, or whatever you may be doing, which is good. It's a bit of a step in the right direction, considering we have been wanting other things and side attractions for a while. Not quite the Pokemon World Tournament, but it's a step in the right direction. We've seen there's a flying minigame where you're flying through rings, so I don't think this is going to translate to Miraidon and Koraidon gaining the ability to perma-fly everywhere, because that would be just stupid, broken, and OP for the regular traveling. They specifically made it so you could not perma-fly, more or less, with Miraidon and Koraidon, because of the exploit people did back in Legends Arceus with Hisui and Braviary, just literally circling everywhere looking for shinies. That's why they made it so after about 5 seconds, well, not 5 seconds, you get what I mean, you basically start falling out of the sky. It's so people can't just exploit flying around in circles. It's likely going to be just specifically for that one minigame, and you lose it after that. But again, it's a step in the right direction. As for specifically terraforms, we've only seen Terrapagos that has this, and this likely means Terrapagos is going to be the only Pokemon that has this within the DLC. Because what's the point in making a Pokemon whose entire thing is terastallized, that revolves around terastallizing, when every single Pokemon gets access to it? It's no longer special again. When everyone's super, no one will be. Likely, it's just going to be specifically a Terrapagos thing. But now we also get into some other things that I've heard a lot of people thinking about that is likely not going to be happening, and that is the Diplin evolution thing. The problem with something like, say, a Diplin evolution is, it isn't just Diplin that has the Eviolite activate on it. The entire evolutionary family of Applin gets it, so Appletun and Flapple also get it. It is unlikely all of them get. I've seen some people saying that, well, they all converge into one form, but that wouldn't make any sense. Why would you make separate branches that then just immediately converge onto a final thing? It kind of completely removes the purpose of all of those Pokemon. And this could likely be a bug. The main reason for this is things like Stantler, Ursaring, they couldn't use the Eviolite. Until their evolution is added within the Pokedex, not you can obtain it within the game, as in you can just transfer it in, there needs to be a Dex entry for it. Until that happens, you cannot use the Eviolite on those Pokemon, or at least it shouldn't activate. Which, to me, sounds there is something coding-wise wrong. Because even Pokemon that cannot evolve but have a species that evolves, such as male Salandit, male Combee, can technically use the Eviolite. The Eviolite does affect them even though they cannot evolve. It goes by can the species evolves. So likely, the evolution flag is tripped on them for some reason, despite there not being a Pokemon to do so. Now, this could potentially mean they do get some sort of special Terrastall form, or if there are Terrastall forms, it's very limited into what it gets. However, based on the fact that for the 19th Terra type, they specifically said even ordinary Pokemon can use it. That means everything's going to be able to get it, and this 19th Terra type is likely not the key to the Terraforms. Okay, so interesting news, we got the release date for the DLC actually just this morning. I recorded the entire video about 12 hours before this thing even came out, but now we know the actual release date. It is going to be December 14th. Much earlier than I was expecting, and I am more than happy to say I did not see this coming, and I am very pleased it's coming out a lot earlier than I expected. And now, this is going to be the spoilers section, so there will be a timestamp here that shows to where to skip to when kind of everything finishes out, when we go over some more channel stuff as well as some other things that I haven't gone over just yet in the this is the speculation leak section. So, okay, now that the people who do not want to go into the potential leaks and spoilers section have clicked off or skipped ahead, Dokutaro. Basically, Poison Momotaro. So, this thing is the thing that I'm really expecting is the end-all, be-all of Kieran's story. I know a lot of people are pulling for it to be Ghost type. I don't think it's going to be a Ghost type. I think it's going to be a Dark type more than anything. And this is also where the sort of thing that I hinted at before of the sort of 5th storyline, the zombies, comes in. Yes, there are zombies. I for a while thought it was Ghost as well, because, oh, zombies, Ghost. That math checks out. But then I also remembered, yeah, there's a number of times that things Pokemon can do have not actually tracked with what their typings are. Umbreon's Poisonous Sweat. Anyone remember that? Yeah. There's a number of times where Pokemon have attributes that allow them to do things that really doesn't fall in line with their typings, and my other hypothesis is about Terapagos being Psychic type. Reason for that, if you look at the Loyal 3 or the Lying 3, they're all Poison type. Ogerpon is Grass type. Poison is Grass. If we are assuming Dokutaro is going to be Poison as well, because it is sort of the trio master of the, well, Loyal 3, who are all based on the Legend of the Tale of Momotaro, it would have to be Poison type itself. Now, there's not a whole lot that really resists Psychic. It is Psychic itself, Steel. So getting the picture of what I'm presuming is Dokutaro from here, and it did give me some ideas for potential typing for it. It can look a little bit metallic in some areas, but that could also just be the reflection of the very soft light on it. So potentially, if we do go with Terapagos being a potential rock type, Poison Steel would actually make sense, as it would also be super effective against the rock typing. And Dokutaro could be Steel type, maybe, but that wouldn't give it a way of beating Terapagos or Terapagos, which I think is what this legendary is maybe going to be, because Miss Briar connection to Blueberry Academy, and this is only if the converging storylines of Miss Briar, Terapagos, and Kieran Dokutaro all converge into one singular storyline, which it could potentially not, but I kind of am running under that assumption for a few things, because it would make sense if they create a legendary to counter the other legendaries. Because I'm fully expecting, with the very terrestrial influence and the very, terrestrialization that Ogerpon does, as well as likely Terapagos, it is likely that Dokutaro is going to be a Terra Buster Pokemon, in the same way that Zacian, Zamazenta, and of course Cannon Face Dragon and Eternatus had anti-Dynamax moves. I can see them doing a similar thing with that. And of course a Dark Poison type would do wonders against the presumably Psychic type, the presumed Psychic type Terapagos, and the known Grass type Ogerpon. Which, this is one that I am not 100% confident on. I will certainly say this is the thing that I'm least confident on, because there's a lot of assumptions, ifs, connecting strings that may or may not be connected at all, but that's kind of thing I'm running on the assumption of. But also, it is implied evil. In the story in the Tale of Momotaro is the hero, which the Loyal 3 are also, the heroes. They help, they fight the demon Oni, and they basically come back with it, helping the hero stop the demon, and you're taking the treasure and being the good guys. The Loyal 3 are very clearly the bad guys, meaning Dokutaro is the bad guy. There's a complete flipping of the script, as well as the implied dark storyline that Kieran's going down, and of course you saw from the thumbnail, and the thing is going to go up here, mind-controlled Kieran being controlled by Dokutaro. Yeah, this is what I think they mean by the zombies, that Dokutaro is going to have, poison that allow it to control things, which, if I had a nickel for every time a poison monster thing controlled a helpless Mook that now becomes a bad guy, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. With Dokutaro probably not getting a special Terraform, it could even be unable to terrestrialize itself. I don't think this is likely. More likely, I think it's just going to be anti-Terra moves, or its ability is going to be able to bypass terrestrialization and target the base typing of a Pokemon, or dealing double damage to Terra Pokemon. The other one is Terapagos, or Terapagos. I can never decide which one I actually am going on with. I'm just going to flip-flop between both of them, like Kieran and Kyurem. But this one I am more convinced of. Psychic-type base, I don't think it's going to be Dragon, I don't think it's going to be normal, and I can see it being Rock, but I can see it being Psychic Rock, but not pure Rock. And this, I think, comes down to its terrestrialization is actually going to be limited to 1 Terra type. The 19th type, which I still running under the assumption is typeless. The reason why is, again, Terrapagos' entire shell has all the Terra types on it, and I know there's a lot of wild thoughts about, oh, this thing's gonna be, it's gonna have like a new ability that's like old school Protean again, or it's gonna be like adaptability where it gets stab on everything. I don't think those are all quite the case. I think what's gonna happen is you need to balance what is a realistic outcome for what Terrapagos has, which is every single Terra type access, and what we know about the 19th Terra type, which is it's gonna have the colors of every single Terra type, which likely means it's just gonna be typeless, but boost the power of regular Terra Blast. Now apply that to a Pokemon whose entire gimmick is Terastallization. I think what it's going to do is it's just gonna be typeless. But on Terrapagos, because we saw that Ogerpon receive a special benefit whenever it terastallizes into any of its forms, I think with this what it's going to do is going to interact with Terrapagos' ability to make it have reduced stab on everything. So instead of a 50% boost, maybe a 30% boost to when it uses every single type, making it have an edge over Pokemon in some ways, but not be so dominantly overpowered. The devs are very clearly aware people are not fond of absurdly overpowered Pokemon these days. Paradox Pokemon are actually very similar to the Ultra Beasts, just much more scaled back. People were not fond of how overpowered Zacian was, and they nerfed that. They are paying attention. So very likely, Terrapagos is not going to be some absurd broken thing. It probably isn't going to be some brutal sweeper destroyer of worlds. Those are the two things I'm a little less sure of. Again, Terrapagos may or may not have this Terra type thing. And one other thing that I know people are kind of going with is there's a third form. This does not seem likely for two reasons. One, it already has a special Terra form. If there is a third form, it's probably when it terastallizes into a basic regular Terra type, because there are coding for, say, another form of it. But this could just be it terastallizing into a regular Terra type, or this is simply an in-battle transformation that is for a specific move. We've seen things like Eternamax Eternatus. You can't use it, but it's a form. And even Pokemon like Lunala, Xerneas, technically Marshadow Zenith form, these are all other forms that are allowed within the game's coding as a special model that needs to be programmed in to be another form, but it's not something that you can use. It only activates this form for a move animation or a specific move. People could likely be mixing this up. The other thing also is that, some of that has actually happened with other Pokemon. We have non-usable alternate forms of various Pokemon. Rotom Dex, Miraidon and Koraidon's Ride modes. Those are all programmed in as a separate form. This seems to be brought on in much the same way that the Legendary Beast and Swords of Justice Tribrids were what people wanted from Paradox versions of them, seems to be brought on from this picture of Terrapagos as like Terra King. Which, it could happen. This could be a thing. But this, I think, would be, if this is an actual form that we fight, I think could end up being like Eternamax Eternatus, where it's just one big raid boss battle, as opposed to something we can actually use ourselves. Purely from the state of, how would you have this form be different than its regular terastallization form, where it's got all the types on its back? What would make this form... I guess the real question would be more, what makes the other forms have a reason to exist outside of just always going with the big form? That's kind of the problem. If they make two separate gimmicks for it, they both need to have a purpose, which we've seen from things like G-Maxing. If you make two of them, only one of them people actually care about. Only one of them is like the actual one that you really put effort into. Which is why I think it's less likely we're gonna get a third form as an actual usable thing, and that it's more likely something that's in a cutscene, something that's in like a boss battle only, or it just is, that's the name of the special Terra form, and then the other form is the regular, Terra Grass Terrapagos. The other major thing to remember is the Scarlet and Violet books are heavily stylized. They're not meant to be reflecting reality. They're reflecting things that the writer thought. It's a stylization, not a photograph. Some people I know that have worried about it being, oh, it's going to be an Arceus reskin, or it's going to have old school Protean. Those I think are a lot less likely because they've actually already done a Pokemon that is meant to be sort of a lesser version of Arceus before. That was Soul Ally. And having a Pokemon that would have old school Protean that just retools the typing every other move would kind of remove the purpose of terastallizing. Because Protean and Libero do not activate when you terastallize, which, assuming this new 19th Terra type, would the same would hold. There would be no reason to have a Pokemon whose entire gimmick is terastallization not terastallize. Now, the only way that this would work, potentially, is if its type changes with its... If it did have Protean 2.0, it would change its Terra type into those typings. So, oh, for this turn it's Terra Water, the next turn it's Terra Rock, or whatever. And some of the thoughts of, well, signature move, what if it changes typing randomly every turn? That's a lot less practical than you'd think, even if it had a signature move that did become its own typing. That's not really something you want. A random type is historically not really good. That's the reason why things like Kecleon aren't good. It's also why Moody is not really used competitively, unless you're really doing it as a meme. Something that is that random you can't rely on. And very few legendary Pokemon have RNG as their thing. And now we can finally get into the Area Zero expansion that I've been kind of wanting to talk about for a while. So, we do kind of know Area Zero is expanding. They very pointedly in the trailer made a particular emphasis of the, as I'm calling it, the Rune Room, where there's that giant geoglyph carved into the ground. They lingered on that for a little bit, as well as the fact that Paradox Pokemon only exist in Area Zero, outside of the one Great Tusk Iron Tread that escaped, and the whole reason for that is to show you Paradox Pokemon exist before you beat the game. That's narrative, really, versus actual stuff that makes sense. And it wouldn't make sense for Indigo Disc, Blueberry Academy, to have Paradox Pokemon. One problem with having that, basically the rune floor opening up, is what happens to Pokemon in that room? That's not exactly a big room, and that door takes up a good amount of the floor space. So what would happen to things like Roaring Moon and Iron Valley, which you can exclusively find there? There needs to be significantly more to Area Zero. Because in Area Zero, it's more or less a straight line. Yes, it's a winding spiral that goes all the way down, but it's basically a one-way path. You go down there, you can only keep going down. And then there's that one offshoot area that just dead ends in a cave, and yeah, it circles around, and you can get the Steel Beam TM there. But it's weird that there's this big giant geoglyph. There's nothing there, except that giant geoglyph. What if it opened up? What's the best way to hide something in plain sight for a DLC? You have a giant cliff that people think leads to Kalos. Everyone thinks that's where the DLC is going to go. But then, oh, that cave in Area Zero, that's too obvious. That's not going to do that because it's too obvious. And then it is exactly where it is. After they show us an area that's not on the mainland Paldea map, no one's going to expect that to be the case. And then they pull the rug out from under us, and it's actually there. This is what is likely going to be expanded, and this is probably where we're going to find Terrapagos. After all, the Violet and Scarlet books showed Terrapagos in there. It also would fit the hidden treasure of Area Zero. It is the hidden treasure of Area Zero, which is where you get the other Paradox Pokemon. Because again, Paradox Pokemon don't exist outside of Area Zero. Outside, of course, the Great Tusk Iron Treads, which escaped for containment breach reasons, which is implied to be the only one that escaped, as well as they specifically say that was the only one that escaped. This would allow for a huge expansion on Arven's Road, which we know Arven, Nimona, and Penny are going to be featured in the DLC. They have no connection to the Blueberry Academy unless they're transfer students. What does make sense is they were with you in Area Zero when you went there the first time. Likely, this is still Arven's parents screwing around with things, and it's basically fixing more problems they created. So Arven's story is going to continue to expand, going into Area Zero things, but also, 4 of you, well, 3 friends, and of course you, Terra Raid battles are done with 4 players. Having Area Zero be where you get the legendary Terra Raids is the most likely explanation. Because it wouldn't make sense for legendaries to be in the Indigo Disc on Blueberry Academy. It wouldn't make sense for them to be in Kitakami. What is the one place where we know reality is entirely unstable because of the time machine? That's Area 0. And this is the most interesting part about the entirety of the expansion. Whether or not it's going to be huge or not, we're going to be getting access to, at the very least, new paradoxes. We're going to be having some more new story, but also, it doesn't make sense for Terrapagos to be on Blueberry Academy because Terrapagos has significantly more to do with something like Area 0 than it does to do with, again, the giant modern technological Indigo Disk Blueberry Academy, as well as the very likely Dokutaro presence as the main story of, at the very least, Legendary on that island with Kirin. It wouldn't make sense for there to be two legendaries, one of which is like this ancient turtle monster, to also be there, because we've also seen, again, really in the trailer, where Terrapagos is and where like it flashes over to looking like the Terrastall form. That does not look like the Indigo Disk. That is a cave. Those are the crystals of Area 0. That is not a building. It's likely Ms. Briar is doing some shenanigans she's not supposed to be doing. But that's likely how we're going to get the legendary raids. And with the Indigo Disk, Blueberry Academy's puzzles and all the kids and people there, with all the people that are going to be on the Indigo Disk, and very likely Dokutaro mind-jacking Kirin, I believe the zombies that are going to be present are just going to be mind-controlled students. That they're not actually zombies, just an internal file name. A lot of games actually do that, where they will use an internal file name that isn't always accurate to what the thing actually is. It's just what it more passively resembles. And likely, you're going to have to either battle them, or they're just going to be some special models of people. And various NPCs that are going to go around as you're doing things, with Kirin being mind-jacked by Dokutaro. It will be interesting if they actually have Dokutaro mind-controlling Kirin have his team be stronger. You know, sort of something like what Lucimine's team was with Mother Beast Lucimine. But that is all speculation at this point. And now for the people who skipped ahead to the no spoiler timestamp, thank you very much for skipping there and bypassing the spoiler section. But yes. Apologies if this was a bit rambling, if some of the stuff was a little less coherent than it could be. And potentially, Blueberry Academy, because it is located offshore from Unova, could play a bit of a role in hinting at the future Black and White remakes. We don't know how far offshore it actually is, but we know it is offshore. Maybe you can go out of the top of Blueberry Academy and see off in the distance Castelia City. I don't think you'll be able to go to Unova proper, but there might be some Easter eggs and throwaway references here and there. We also know that in the Blueberry Clubhouse, you need Blueberry Academy points to sort of do things with the clubhouse room, invite various trainers, do the trades. Likely this is probably going to end up being the watts, similar to the watts that you could collect back in Sword and Shield and use that to get the vitamin vending machines and other various little tiny specific things that were sort of miscellaneously helpful. But I don't think it's going to be you can go to mainland Unova. That would be awesome, but I don't think that's going to be the case, unfortunately. It also is not looking like we're going to be getting anything akin to the Apricorn machines here. But again, you can't have all the good stuff and things. That's unfortunately something you're going to have to go do the Porto Miranata auctions for if you want those. However, this is probably going to go into the Galarian Star equivalent for this, where you can go challenge a second new tournament in the Academy, or challenge the Academy here, where you get this other tournament, and it operates like how the Galarian Star tournament did in Sword and Shield, where you can fight the classic league and gym leaders with the new characters a part of it as well, which would be interesting, but again, not adding really too much. There are things you could potentially get with, say, hints to the Black and White remakes. But now as for the Black and White remakes, or at least the speculation on the remakes of Black and White, I do not think that they will actually be releasing them on the Switch. I think it's going to be on the Switch's successor console they will be releasing these remakes because of timing. At that point, the Switch will be better part of a decade old. Switch is already 6 years old at this point. 2 years out from now, it'll be 8 years old, and unless the Switch is sticking around until it's over 10 years old, I don't think that they're going to be doing the same mistake they did last time with Unova, which was release the game on a system that everyone knows the better version of the system's coming out in a couple of months. And that makes me think we're not going to be getting the Black and White remakes in 2024 or 2025 unless they make it a relatively close to release date of the console game release, which I don't think would probably happen. But then again, midway through a generation, they did release Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee, which was a Gen 7 game, which was for the first time on the Switch when the other ones were on the DS. So it could happen. Which, if they do release it at 2025, that would only give it a year of a lifespan, however, before, well, the 30th anniversary of Pokemon comes out, and then possibly Generation 10. Or they just simply don't release Black and White remakes. But then again, that would mean 4 years between the release of Scarlet Violet and then the release of Generation 10. So, it's possible we could get the Generation 5 remakes in 2025. I know a lot of people are pulling for a 2024 release date for the, well, Black and White remakes, which I really don't fully understand. The entirety of Scarlet Violet isn't even out, and people are already hoping for the games to be over. I don't know, I don't really understand that. But with the delay in release dates for the DLCs, as well as the just sheer size it's going to have to be, again, the 4 major stories, maybe 3 if you forcibly compress them even further, all of that releasing start of January earliest, or even start of December. That would be less than a year of that thing being out before you then immediately release Black and White, which that would be 2 years out, which even though these games do have generally a 2-year life cycle before the next game comes out, after all we had Sword and Shield release, then a year later you had the conclusion of the DLCs, and then a year after that you had BDSP releasing. BDSP was also a big time crunch. They kind of made that as a space filler when they released Legends as well. And 2 years out, I could see them doing a remake of Black and White. Now, a year after the conclusion of this DLC, releasing Black and White would kind of make sense, but even then, Scarlet Violet came out in 2022. It would be less than a year out from the end of the DLC before they then release the next entire game. With Legends, I mean, Legends, they released that 3 months after BDSP, so who knows, all bets are off. But logically, with the Switch somewhat nearing its end of its lifespan, as well as there are many things floating around about the Switch's successor, all of that floating around, and the likely timetable of when the next system coming out, again, late 2024, early 2025, that wouldn't make sense for releasing a new AAA Pokemon game. Because even if we assume in 2024 they release Black and White, and then mid-2025 they then release the Switch 2, that's what, maybe 7 months of that system being relevant, and even they have to market the Switch 2 beforehand, so people are going to know the Switch 2 is coming out and no one's going to care about the games on the Switch. The same mistake that happened when Black and White came out. Game Freak's probably not going to make that same mistake again. But thank you all for listening to this rambling thing of a video. I do hope when I edit it, it is a little bit more coherent. There's a lot of stuff in here that is going to be cut out, and I hope it's more coherent for all of you guys. Thank you for sticking with me. If you haven't done so already, please do not forget to leave a like, subscribe for more, check out the other stuff and things that we do around here. You guys are the ones that make all of this possible. And once again, thank you. Thank all of the channel members. Link is below if you would like to join them, help support the channel, and let your friends know what we do around here. This was a massive editing project, and I haven't even started editing. I already see just by the pure video files, this thing is going to be well over an hour long. Maybe if I can work some editing space magic to short it down, hopefully it'll be a bit more tame. But I'll see you guys next time.